Nameless, Tennessee. Nameless, Tennessee was a town of maybe 90 people if you pushed it. A dozen houses along the road, a couple of barns, same number of churches, a general merchandise store selling fire chief gasoline, and a community center with a lighted volleyball court. Behind the center was an open roof rusting metal privy with "Paint Me" on the door. In the hollow of a nearby oak lay a full pint of Jack Daniel's Black Label. From the houses, the odor of coal smoke. Next to a red tobacco barn stood the general merchandise with a poster of Senator Albert Gore, Jr. smiling from the window. I knocked. The door opened part way. A tall, thin man said, "Closed up for good," and started to shut the door. "Don't want to buy anything, just a question for Mr. Thurman Watts." The man peered through the slight opening. He looked me over. "What question would that be?" "If this is Nameless, Tennessee, could he tell me how it got that name?" The man turned back into the store and called out, "Miss Jenny, somebody here wants to know how Nameless come to be nameless." Miss Jenny edged to the door and looked me and my truck over. Clearly she didn't approve. She said, "You know as well as I do, Thurman. Don't keep him on the stoop in the damp to tell him." Miss Jenny, I found out, was Mrs. Virginia Watts, Thurman's wife. I stepped in, and they both began telling me the story, adding a detail here, the other correcting a fact there, both smiling at the foolishness of it all. It seems the Hilltop settlement went for years without a name. Then one day, the post office department told the people if they wanted mail up on the mountain, they would have to give the place a name you could properly address a letter to. The community met. There were only a handful, but they commenced debating. Some wanted patriotic names, some names from nature. One man recommended, in all seriousness, his own name. They couldn't agree, and they ran out of names to argue about. Finally, a fellow tired of the talk. He didn't like the mail he received anyway. "Forget the darn post office," he said. "This here's a nameless place if ever I seen one, so leave it be." And that's just what they did. Watts pointed out the window. "We used to have signs on the road, but the Halloween boys keep tearing them down." "You think Nameless is a funny name," Miss Jenny said. "I see it plain in your eyes. Well, you take yourself up north a piece to Difficult or Defeated or Shake Rag. Now them are silly names." The old store, lighted only by 350-watt bulbs, smelled of coal oil and baking bread. In the middle of the rectangular room, where the oak floor sagged a little, stood an iron stove. To the right was a wooden table with an unfinished game of checkers and a stool made from an apple tree stump. On shelves around the walls sat earthen jugs with corncob stoppers, a few canned goods, and some of the 2,000 old clocks and clockworks Thurman Watts owned. Only one was ticking. The others he just looked at. I asked how long he'd been in the store. 35 years, but we close the first day of the year. We're hoping to sell this to a churchy couple, upright people, no atheists." "Did you build this store?" "I built this one, but it's the third general store on the ground. I fear it'll be the last. I take no pleasure in that. Once you could come in here for a gallon of paint, a pickle, a pair of shoes, and a can of corn." "Or horehound candy," Miss Jenny said, "or corsets and salves. We had cough syrups and all that for the body. In season, we'd buy and sell blackberries and walnuts and chestnuts before the blight got them. And outside, Thurman milled corn and sharpened plows, even shoot a horse sometimes." "We could fix up a horse or a man or a baby," Watts said. "Thurman, tell him we had a doctor on the ridge in them days." "We had a doctor on the ridge in them days. As good as any doctor a living. He'd cut a crooked toenail or deliver a woman. Dead these last years." "I got some bad ham meat one day," Miss Jenny said, "and took to vomiting all day, all night, hanging on the drop edge of yonder. I said to Thurman, 'Thurman, unless you want shut of me, call the doctor.'" "I studied on it," Watts said. "You never did. You got him right now. He come over and put 3 drops of iodine in half a glass of well water. I drank it down and the vomiting stopped with the last swallow. Would you think iodine could do that?" "He put Miss Jenny on 1 teaspoon of spirits of ammonia in well water for her nerves. Ain't nothing works better for her to this day. Calms me like the hand of the Lord." Hilda, the Watts's daughter, came out of the back room. "I remember him," she said. "I was just a baby. Y'all were talking to him, and he lifted me up on the counter and gave me a stick of juicy fruit and a piece of cheese." "Knew the old medicines," Watts said. Only drugstore he needed was a good kitchen cabinet. None of them antibiotics that hit you worsen your ailment. Forgotten lore now, the old medicines, because they ain't profiting iodine. Miss Jenny started back to the side room where she and her sister Marilyn were taking apart a duck-down mattress to make bolsters. She stopped at the window for another look at ghost dancing. How do you sleep in that thing? Ain't you all cramped and cold? How does a clam sleep in the shell? Watts said, in my defense. Thurman, get the boy a piece of buttermilk pie afore he goes on. Hilda, get him some buttermilk pie. He looked at me. You like good music? I said I did. He cranked up an old Edison phonograph, the kind with the big morning glory blossom for a speaker, and put on a wax cylinder. This will be my mother's prayer, he said. While I ate buttermilk pie, Watts served as disc jockey of Nameless, Tennessee. Here's Mountain Rose. It was one of those moments that you know at the time will stay with you to the grave. The sweet pie, the gaunt man playing the old music, the coals in the stove glowing orange, the scent of kerosene and hot bread. Here's Evening Rhapsody. The music was so heavily romantic we both laughed. I thought, it is for this I have come.